Current NBA analysts and former NBA players discussed their early playoff predictions in the Eastern Conference, and they all had one thing in common. That was the Miami Heat. We'll break down these reports on this episode of Heat Digest, where we create daily Miami Heat content. So if that interests you, subscribe to the channel, as almost 90% of you guys currently watching this are not currently subscribed. We appreciate all of your support. Now let's get to it and break down these early playoff predictions, as the season is coming to an end, but we still have no idea who's going to be playing who in the first round of the playoffs, or even who is going to be involved in the play-in positions, either in the East or the West. We're going to focus solely on the Eastern Conference today, as Chris Broussard and Nick Wright on First Things First had this to say about the Miami Heat, as they both picked them to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, saying Chris Broussard picked the Miami Heat to lose to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, while Nick Wright says the Heat will fall to the Milwaukee Bucks. Again, that was in the Eastern Conference Finals. Two educated basketball minds that have been NBA analysts, it feels like forever, now making predictions as we're wrapping up the NBA season. The Miami Heat just have 17 games remaining, but again, like I mentioned earlier, we have no absolute clue on who's going to be in what seed, excluding the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, which is being held dominantly by the Boston Celtics. But again, we'll get to that in just a second, as the Miami Heat are sitting well in the 8th seed, only a half game back from the 7th and the 6th seed, the Indiana Pacers and the Philadelphia 76ers. So very interesting. This graphic came up on the show, First Things First, where Nick Wright and Chris Broussard were making these takes. And this is a very interesting graphic, especially for the teams that you're looking at. It has the Heat, the Celtics, and the Bucks. The regular win percentages, where the Heat are the only team sub 600, which is very interesting. But to think about it, if you look at the rest of the numbers listed, they're all playoff based, and that's where things get very interesting. For playoff win-loss record, the Heat are 38-28 to the Boston Celtics' 36-30, as well as the Bucks 29-21. If we go to series wins, the Heat lead this category with 8 series wins to the Celtics 7 and the Bucks 6. Conference Finals appearances, the Heat are tied for first in this category out of these 3 teams listed at 3, tied with the Boston Celtics, who are also at 3 appearances in the Conference Finals, and finally the Bucks with 1. And then this is where things get very interesting. The NBA Finals appearances listed here. Heat leading the way with 2 finals appearances, the Celtics with 1, and obviously the Bucks have 1, where they did win the NBA championship. The NBA titles, obviously the Bucks are leading that category with the only win out of these 3 teams over the last 5 years. So just very interesting when you put everything into perspective. I know this Miami Heat team currently sitting at 35 wins and 30 losses with 17 games left. Very interesting, to say the least. They show really hot moments, they show really shitty moments, they look flat, they stall out, and they look like a team that shouldn't even be involved in the NBA playoffs. And then they have moments where they look like there's not a team in the world that wants to play them, due not only because of the defense that shows up and creates a absolute havoc for the opposing team, but the offensive weapons that they have. Bam Adebayo shows up, and you're getting near 20 points and at least 10 rebounds a game from him, including the defense that he brings. And then you have Jimmy Butler, who, when it gets closer to the playoff time, I don't even have to explain how great Jimmy Butler becomes. He's a great player overall, but it seems like it's just a light switch when the playoff time really does turn on. So does Jimmy Butler. And then we have players like Terry Rozier, has been newly acquired, a legit 20-point-per-game ball-handling scorer who can really facilitate the offense and hit open shots, as well as create his own shots, not only for himself but others. He's another 20-point-per-game scorer. I know he's not around that number with the Miami Heat, but as things slowly come to fruition, I think he can get closer to that number like he was in Charlotte for all those years. And then finally, Tyler Hero, who we haven't had for almost, I feel like 10 days now with that knee injury, right foot tendonitis. He is a legit 20-point-per-game scorer, and we're missing him desperately. He hasn't been playing either. When this all comes together and we get into this NBA, we get to a 7-game series in the NBA playoffs, no matter who we are matched up against, we give them problems. And we've seen it throughout time. And now it should be no surprise, as not only was Chris Broussard and Nick Wright discussing this and involved the Miami Heat, also 2 Celtic legend, a Timberwolves legend as well, and Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce on KG Certified, the podcast hosted by none other than Kevin Garnett. This was just 3 days ago. Paul Pierce was asked about the NBA playoffs and who really the Boston Celtics should fear. As you know, Paul Pierce is a true ambassador of the Boston Celtics still, as he roots for him. He's sitting courtside just last night, last night, and he had this to say, saying, and I quote, "Miami to the Celtics is the biggest threat. I don't give a damn what you say." He was, end of quote. He was discussing this with Kevin Garnett, again, on KG Certified, a great podcast, because Kevin Garnett, if you guys haven't listened to him speak about the NBA game, whether as a player or now as an analyst, he's one of the best basketball minds ever. He's as brutally honest as they come. He's a great listen, and I know he's a rival in the sense that he was a Boston Celtic for the majority of his career besides the Timberwolves. Awesome listen to as a basketball mind, and just to listen to the game of basketball be broken down. Great basketball mind. But again, it's another important piece of the puzzle, as the Boston Celtics and the Miami Heat have played 3 times this year, and they've been competitive games. All but one of them, Game 2, which came late in the month of January, we got stomped. We got beat by 33 points, 143-110. That game was in Miami. It was not a great showing for the Miami Heat. But again, the other 2 games, the first game, 111-119. Obviously, the Boston Celtics won, as they've won all 3 games in this season series against the Miami Heat. But 111-119, this game was extremely competitive. And then Game 3, this game should have looked a lot like Game 2, where we got beat by a substantial amount of points. This game ended 110-106. If you did not watch this game, I'll remind you, because this is the game that Jimmy Butler, that was the first game Jimmy Butler missed due to the death he had in the family, so he didn't even play the game. We assumed he was going to play, and then I think it was about 30 minutes before tip-off, we heard that he wasn't playing for personal reasons. Then we lost Terry Rozier it was a very scary injury. We thought he was going to lose him for the season due to the fact it being a knee injury to the right leg. He went up for a layup about halfway through the game. I believe it was halfway through the third quarter. He exited, did not return. We ended up missing him for a period of time. This was right before the All-Star break. Duncan Robinson and Jaylen Brown got into a scuffle. We thought Duncan Robinson was going to go down with an elbow/shoulder injury on his shooting arm during the scuffle that he got into with Jaylen Brown in the midst of that game, as well as this game just being a Boston Celtic and Miami Heat rivalry game. It had all of the feels of it. It was in Miami. It was electric from start to finish. Kevin Love was playing out of his damn mind. It was a joy to watch. But seriously, we couldn't have been more shorthanded in that game. Oh, and we also lost Josh Richardson. I cannot forget that. Josh Richardson also went down. That was the day that he dislocated his right shoulder. That is the reason we will not have him for the remainder of this NBA season, regardless of how deep of a playoff run we have in Miami due to the shoulder surgery he had just 4 or 5 days ago. So again, we went into that game and we started shorthanded, and it got even worse as we lost 2 key players in Terry Rozier, who was just freshly acquired. We didn't have Jimmy Butler going into it, and then we lost Josh Richardson, who obviously, I don't believe he started that game, but he is a hell of a role player. He comes off the bench and he provides a spark that really no other role players or really bench players can really provide, not just on the Miami Heat team, but around the NBA, as Josh Richardson played such a key role, not only as a 3-and-D type of player, but the length he brought, his ability to defend 1 through 3. He was really a great, and he had so much experience. He was a great role player. We're going to miss him dearly. But again, another very competitive example of the Miami Heat in the game with a team like the Boston Celtics, who are the only team in both the East and the Western Conference that are going to run away with a definitive number 1 spot and not have to battle throughout the next 17 games, bearing them losing like 15 of them, for the next spot. They've already clinched a playoff position, and it's going to be the first spot, bearing a absolutely disastrous downfall, which I'm here for. If I could watch them lose the majority of their last 15 to 20 games, however they have left. I know Miami has 17. We need to see Miami get out of the play-in positions in order so they don't have to win more games in order to get to the real playoffs, if you will. Again, I think that should be step 1 for this Miami Heat team as we go. If we play the Milwaukee Bucks, again, this is going to be very competitive. We lost the season series 2-1 to Milwaukee, only 3 games played, but the last game we did play was the game the Miami Heat did win. It was in Milwaukee, and we dominated 123-97. If you notice something, these games are extremely high scoring, not just for the Bucks, but for the Miami Heat. We do not normally see the Miami Heat score 114, 124, or 123 points in a game. It's usually Grit and grime, a lot of good defense played. Try to hold these games under 110, 115 points scored, even less than that, because we struggle on the offensive side of the ball. A lot of the time, we go flat, we go stagnant. You've heard me say this a bunch in these videos because it's so mind-numbing to watch us with the offensive talent we have just fall out and stall out in these offensive periods and allow teams to really score the basketball. But then the defense shows up and we are a problem to deal with. I will say that if we play the Milwaukee Bucks, I really like our chances a lot more than against the Boston Celtics, not just because the Celtics are so good all around, but how bad the Milwaukee Bucks are defensively. The Miami Heat scoring 114, 124, and then beating you 123 to 97 is not a. I know it's 2-1. We ended up losing 2 of these games. Still, it's what you see, and if we get into a playoff series, we've seen it before when the Miami Heat play the Milwaukee Bucks. We're 8-6 since 2020 against the Milwaukee Bucks in the playoffs. I can't wait to see how this goes. If we play the Celtics, it's going to feel like a rivalry playoff series again, and I can't wait for that. It's like when we played the Knicks or when we were playing the Pacers in like 2015, 2016. Those series are so much fun to watch as a Miami Heat fan. We are 11-9 against the Boston Celtics since 2020 as well, and that includes 2 series that went to Game 7s, that being the last 2 consecutive ones that we've been up against Boston. I hope it's about the same, as they're extremely competitive. They're rivalry games. The atmosphere is like no other, whether it be in Boston or in Miami, and I think it's going to be a joy to watch regardless of it being Boston or Milwaukee for the Miami Heat, because I believe they have an extremely good chance at winning a series against anyone in the NBA, East or West, and I can't wait to see how it plays out, especially over the next 17 games, and see if the Miami Heat can get out of the play-in position and see who we can match up against in the first round of the NBA playoffs. But that's going to be it for this episode of Heat Digest. Again, thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all things Miami Heat, and have a good one.